Hello, greetings, and welcome everyone to the ASL Week 9 review. As always, I am SirMoth, and I am joined from vacation this time by Lord Brad.
I will say I'm recording this video with some wind in the background, looking at the ocean. So not many better places to record a video.
Yeah, and perfect timing there. Just as you said, the wind managed to be as loud as it's been this whole call. Uh, but I'm sure there will obviously be some audio distortion because of it, but I'm sure it'll be manageable. All right, so you are up with match number 1, and this match was Static versus Cyril.
This was a very exciting match for maybe unfortunate reasons. I'm not sure if this is one of the most intellectual matches I've ever seen. Static forgot an item on his Rotom Mow, which Cyril immediately tried to knock off with Zeraora and was unable to do so. And I think to the collective community, a big what just happened type thing. Because either Static Pro played and didn't have an item on purpose so it couldn't get knocked off, or he's a moron. And I've known Static long enough to know that definitely isn't the first one. But just a really fun battle. A lot of back and forth things. I thought when what was it? Static Crit killed the Volcarona, I believe,
Yep.
with an Embor. Thought that was really impactful, and I thought it may have been a big deal. But then Sarl later on Crit killed a Grimmsnarl that was absolutely going to finish and sweep the game. So quite a bit of back and forth, quite a bit of hacks, a lot of kind of weird things. But and I'll get your feedback. But I thought it maybe evened out by the end of the game, or at least got close to it. It was a good match. It was an exciting match, but maybe not for the right reason.
Yeah, I found it really entertaining when you said quite the intellectual match because apparently Cyril had a pretty good night that night and doesn't even remember this match. Uh, but I would agree that the hacks would even out if it was just those two things, but I also think the discharge into double full para on Florges
Yeah.
was pretty huge. That probably put the RNG a little on Static side, but regardless, there were certainly some interesting plays throughout this match. I thought it was really weird when Cyril didn't wish up her Mega Blastoise because Mega Blastoise was at like half health and Floor just got multiple opportunities to wish pass to whatever it wanted in front of Rotom Mow. I believe 2 times it got free wish passes, and both times went into something perfectly healthy. So I think that may have helped Cyril quite a bit because I think Mega Blastoise had a lot more work to do. But yeah, other than that, there was a little bit of hacks, but it was still a very fun and exciting match to watch.
Maybe Sandslash's best game, which is unfortunate to say because it didn't do a whole lot, but it did get the Super Fang off
Yeah,
on the Blastoise, so it at least had an impact. But just it seems like Sandslash hasn't made a lot of a difference this season. Maybe I'm wrong.
I don't think you're wrong. I mean, at least up until this point, I think it's pretty definitively easy to say it hasn't done too much.
Yeah.
I don't know. Sandslash in general is kind of weird. It just seems subpar most of the time. I don't expect that we're probably going to see a match where it's like, oh man, Sandslash here. That was the turning point. I think Sandslash is much more just a get up rocks, get up rapid spin. Super Fang every once in a while can be good. Maybe check a few Pokemon, but yeah, I don't expect too much from it most of the time. I would like to pause here to note that we had some technical difficulties due to Brad's connection over at vacation. For instance, right here, he cut out for a bit. Later on, he sounds like a robot. So there will be cuts here. We are professional. Don't mind us. Continuing with the video.
What? Did I cut out?
Oh, yeah, you did. Okay, there you are again.
Okay. Did you hear what I mentioned about the Uxie?
Absolutely not. So go ahead and
So
repeat that.
I did think the Uxie, I think this is maybe its most significant contribution since the transaction. You know, he picked up the Uxie for the Celesteela in a roundabout way a couple of weeks ago. Uxie had some U-turns, had some screens. I thought this was a decent Uxie game. So maybe some dividends from that transaction.
Yeah, that's kind of interesting, and I'm glad you actually cut back in because I was about to go into match 2, but I almost forgot. Something really interesting about this match is the last couple of turns.
Mm-hmm.
The Uxie was really low, and in the back it was like 30 something percent. And Aegislash was in, it had procced a weakness policy, but it was on like 20 something percent. Cyril's last Pokemon was a full health Lycanroc Dusk.
Mm-hmm.
What's really interesting is here, I mean, the Aegislash was in its blade form, and Lycanroc Dusk was focus, or not focus, choice band. So Lycanroc Dusk ended up clicking the Accelerock, probably trying to hit Aegislash before it could Shadow Sneak, and then to kill the Uxie.
Mm-hmm.
But that ended up with Aegislash King Shielding, and then Lycanroc couldn't take down the Aegislash. What's interesting is Cyril 100% lived that Shadow Sneak because it was a specially based Aegislash, so it couldn't have been Max Adamant. And Cyril also had Stone Edge on the Lycanroc Dusk set and would have outsped the Uxie. So if Cyril had actually clicked Stone Edge instead of Accelerock and hit, she won the game right there.
As I said, an extremely intellectual matchup.
Yes, I'm sure that may have had some amount to do with the situation Cyril was in. Maybe it didn't, but at least there's that John just sitting right there.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, what can you do, right? I mean, what's done is done.
Yeah.
Onward and upward, because that was just rough.
Yeah, for sure. But anyway, match number 2. Speaking of that was just rough. Your match
Segways.
versus yeah, your match versus Melone. Well, to summarize the match, Gothitelle versus Lickilicky. Gothitelle was Cosmic Power, Rest, Charge Beam, Stored Power. Lickilicky had only Toxic to do damage. So, long story short, Gothitelle got to max, swept the team. That was pretty much that. And, I mean, Gothitelle did exactly what you want it to do. That's pretty much what that Pokemon is designed to do. Trap something that doesn't expect it and sweep a game, hope your opponent is unprepared, and it was the perfect storm.
Yeah, I mean, I will give myself just a little bit of credit in that this was the week I kind of Goth wasn't working for me earlier in the season. I wasn't using it right, to be fair, and I kind of waited a couple of weeks, and I waited for what I thought was the right match. I thought this match in particular was the right match because, you know, Goth and Papacoco aren't good partners. You can't rest unless you're terrain. Furthermore, Melone has some of the best breakers in the league, if not the best breakers. Goth doesn't like dealing with breakers. I thought Goth would be just completely unexpected this match. And because of that, I think he would check out the right ones. And he has ones that need shed shell if I'm bringing Goth. So I took an educated gamble that because of his team makeup and because of the way I've been playing, he wouldn't look for it to come. I think that gamble was correct. I think he was prepared to come. And I think actually Goth could have trapped everyone on his team except maybe Drake, probably Robbie. Everything else get trapped immediately and could have moved up one spot. So I think it was just the right set for the matchup.
Yeah, that's definitely, I think, the correct thought process going into it. I think, yeah, pretty much exactly what you said. Melone wouldn't be prepared for the Gothitelle. And yeah, Gothitelle really, I mean, you brought a lot of pivoting with Tapu Koko and Silvally, or at least enough pivoting that you could easily get Gothitelle in on one or two specific Pokemon that it could counter. So, yeah, with that exact case, uh, that's going to be really good for Gothitelle in any given week if you can pretty much choose its matchup and set up from there. I will say, you're sounding kind of like a robot right now, and have been for a little while. Like, for example, I don't understand what 2 words or 3 words you just said. Maybe that'll fix it. So we're back on it. Is there anything else you want to say about this match?
No, not. I mean, there's not much to be said. Just the right set, and he didn't have what he needed to deal with it. I mean, he lost at team preview.
Yeah, that's completely fair assessment. Sometimes that's just how it happens. So, match number 3, this is your match yet again. Dirty Logic versus IL Kid.
Okay.
So, we fixed robot voice for the second time. Go ahead and give us your thoughts.
Yeah, you hope that we fixed it. That doesn't mean that we did.
Well, for the second time at least, so.
So, what I was saying, Dirty Logic versus Isle Kid, I mean, from turn 1 onward, it was pretty much all bad news. It was a crit U-turn with a Cinderace onto Tauros turn 1 where Stone Edge did negligible damage to the Swampert. And it really went downhill from there. Roserade got off the Toxic Spike early, which is usually great news, but that Toxic Spike didn't do much. And Scizor with Banded, he was Banded U-turn, I think Banded U-turn Bullet Punch maybe. I can't remember the full set. But he did a ton of damage to the Rotom, which obviously was not a great swap in for any type of heavily physically invested set, and died to 2 U-turns by turn 5. It was just all bad news, man. It was all bad news. This was pretty well a one-sided beating. Yeah, I mean, by turn 10, the game is all over except just to be finished out. So you hate to see it. Dirty Logic's having a decent first season. He's learning a lot, certainly, I think. But this was just just an absolute stomping.
Yeah, it really was. I mean, I don't know how much the crit mattered in the end, but regardless of that, just losing Rotom, Durant, and Tauros just one after another like that, and Hitmontop taking a huge chunk for Tornadus, and it's just, yeah, it really just was difficult for Dirty Logic. I don't know if it was a prep thing or anything like that either. It was just kind of tough.
Yeah. Well, and I think that this is part of the problem with Dirty Logic's team. He's got, a very small subset of mons that have to come every week. And when they do, he's got to bring Charizard, he's got to bring Rotom, he's got to bring Roserade. He's got this very small set of mons that has to come. And I'm sure IL Kid, being a skilled coach, is going to prep for those few mons, and these kind of things are going to happen.
Yeah, I'm sure. So moving on to match number 4 here. This was Ian versus Peaches, and man, this was a really good game, I would say. This game was really interesting because I thought that Peaches was actually doing really well through a lot of it. Like Skarmory was a really good check to Tornadus Therian, at least in the early game. That's what it was looking like. Type Null got an early burn that was really impactful. Lipard was actually doing a surprising amount, took down a Mega Sharpedo from full with Grass Knot, which was really cool to
Mm-hmm.
see. But towards the end and towards the middle, Ian started just picking that momentum back up. There was a turn where Slowking dragon-tailed Luxray in, which was probably the absolute worst Pokemon that could have come in. And
Yeah.
Luxray just got a huge amount of damage. There weren't many great defensive checks from Peaches. Rhyperior was a weakness policy set that was able to do a lot, and Tornadus Therian was Nasty Plot this week. And between those two, Slowking was able to Dragon Tail out a little bit, Skarmory, Whirlwind, but it still wasn't enough, and it just Ian managed to bring it back pretty soundly.
Yeah, Sharpedo is way heavier than it seems like it should be.
Yeah, it really is. I think it takes 120 from that.
Yeah, I mean, it's Grass Knot, as you can see from almost anything, pops Sharpedo hard. I don't understand why. It's a head, dude. That's all it is.
Yeah, it's not even a full shark, and a full shark wouldn't even be as heavy as...
It's crazy. It's like taking Wailord levels of damage from a Grass Knot. It makes no sense at all. But I mean, whatever, right?
Yeah, I mean that's Pokemon. If you're gonna start arguing about Pokemon sizes,
yeah, there's no Pokemon logic. You just gotta let that stuff go. But it was a good game. It was a close game. I mean, I think it ended with Ian having like 2% on his Rhyperior. Is that right?
Yes.
I mean, it was. I mean, nothing. It was nothing. You know, it was a really fun game. I mean, I don't know that it went necessarily the way any of us thought it would with the Liepard killing Sharpedo. I certainly didn't have that written down in my book of projections. Peach staying in with his Toxicroak, taking a Psychic to the face. I didn't think that was going to happen either. Yeah, it was an odd game at some points, but man, it was a good one. I mean, you start out with 12 Mons full health, and you end up with 1 Mon left with 2%. That's yeah, I don't know what more you can ask for from that.
Yeah, and I mean, it is Pokemon. I'd be remiss not to mention it. The game did end up going the way it did because late in the game, Tornadus Therian got a flinch on the Mega DNC. Peaches certainly won from that point otherwise. Really unfortunate that it happened that way specifically. But, I mean, outside of that, and I do actually think there were some ways, some switches with Slowking Regenerator and some stuff like that. I won't go into the exact details. There were things that could have been differently. But I mean, it's hard to plan around that 30% flinch when you think you have the game in the bag. So that was rather unfortunate. But other than that, it was still incredibly close and just a good game.
Yeah, I mean, it just is what it is, man. You got to just take those things just like a crooked step in the pathway, man. It's just part of life, part of this game, certainly.
Yeah, and while I do say that the flinch is what won the game for Ian, in games like this, you have to keep in mind that there was a tiny bit of hacks going on the entire time. For example, that burn on Type Null was gigantic. That dealt a ton of damage over time and stuff like that. So you can't necessarily just look at a game, look at the last 3 turns and say, oh, this is why this player won. So...
Yep. I agree.
Yep, so on to match number 5 here. You get to go over Drevos and I's match.
Okay. This was one of the oddest games, certainly, I've seen in a while, in that and you can explain here shortly. I don't know how this came to be. I'm not sure. But what happened was you and Drevos decided your lead matchup before the game was to start. And I don't know how that came to be or why that was. But it was one of the oddest things I've ever seen as a viewer. I've never really experienced that. And certainly as a prepper, I'm sure you would say that that was one of the more unique experiences for you guys, both individually.
Yeah.
And, that actually turned out to matter in quite a bit because you brought a really creative Cobalion set where you were Calm Mind Special, you rested at the end of that, and then you subsequently got hacks to death to where your Cobalion didn't
Yep.
matter at all. So it was this really funny sequence of, wow, that was really smart. Oh, this may work. Oh, nope. No, it won't. So just a very odd beginning to the match. But, I mean, that it was fun. Certainly. Probably more fun for Drevos through the first couple of turns because he ended up getting rid of your Cobalion with relatively minimal damage. But, things happen. But it was really the story of Lando T being banded, honestly. Lando T banded did so much damage.
Mm-hmm.
We did get to see a Colossal get the steam engine boost, which is fun. Unfortunately, you had a Polyrath, so it didn't actually do anything, but still fun to see. Not something you get to see every day. But to me, it was really the story of Lando T, man. Drevos had some good prep. You had a really fancy slow bro where you tried to nasty paw it up and do some stuff, but he had the taunt right there ready on Mega Aggron to stop it from trick rooming. So Drevos played well, but it just seemed like Lando T was too much.
Yeah, I think that's exactly it. So I'll explain how we came to this lead matchup thing. Drevos nicknamed his Sylveon Pink Toes. And my Cobalion is named Tin Legs. And for some reason, early in the season, I saw that Sylveon nickname and I was like, oh, hey, that's kind of like my Cobalion nickname. And so early in the season, I made a fan art, or at least I came up with the concept of it. I made it a few days before this week 9. But basically, it's just Sylveon with toes photoshopped on for legs and Cobalion with Pepsi cans photoshopped on for legs. And I said, okay, this is the fan art for this week. And Drevos said, okay, I'll bring Sylveon if you bring Cobalion. I said, I'll do that if you promise to switch your Sylveon in. And so we came to a compromise of that would be our lead matchup. Really weird. It did not work out in Drevos' favor because you're going with a fairy against a steel. But yeah, that certainly was really interesting because it's like I had to look, okay, so is it going to be a berry to resist? Is it going to be one of the biggest ones, which ended up being the set that came? Specs could take down most Cobalion in one hit. So I was trying to figure out how I could take down any possible set of Sylveon. And I spent 40 minutes, but I finally figured out that Calm Mind with Chesto Rest would take down the Sylveon and leave me healthy to deal with the rest of the team. Unfortunately, it didn't matter too much, but it still did get really important chip on Toxtricity and Illumise. And so it was a fun match. I got full parried 5 times. I missed a Focus Blast. I missed my 1 Hydro Pump. But yeah, because of Landorus Theory and because that Pokemon had such a good matchup, I really was never out of it.
No, and that's why I particularly say I think it was just the match of Lando T because Drevos actually had a lot of things going his control, and that was because every time Lando T came in, something took 50 to 60%, and he ran out of 50 or 60% to give, and that was pretty much the game.
Yep, and I will say, Drevos did do some really cool prep. Toxic on Zygarde was somewhat unexpected, and that's the reason that Landorus Syrian was able to be taken down in the first place.
Hmm.
And the Mega Aggron with Taunt was also really good. But I will say there were a couple other things on Drevos' team that didn't come that would have made the matchup a lot harder for me. Uh, but that's that's the way it went with this specific team. Landers Therian just did an amazing job.
Yeah, yeah, it was a good game. Drevos is a guy that he brings the things he brings. And I don't necessarily. Sometimes I'm like, man, he could have brought that, he could have brought this, but he's had a pretty good season, so it's kind of hard to argue with him. If he feels strongly about bringing something, he's generally been right. This week he didn't work out, but it seems like usually it does.
Yeah, and you can tell that Drevos has been having a good season because while he is going 4-5, he currently has a positive differential of +4. So the matches he's winning pretty well, and the matches he's losing, he's not losing that hard. So
Yeah.
probably a lot of good games in there. So match number 6, this was Shadow versus Brett, and this was yet another very interesting game. As always with Brett's matches, it was a ton of U-turn, a ton of momentum grabbing, and in this case, Polytoad actually did a lot of work. The
Yeah.
Milotic was able to check the Polytoad when it came in, uh, but then the Ferrothorn checked the Milotic, and then it was the Talonflame that checked the Ferrothorn, which was then checked by the Politoed. So there was like 4 Pokemon that were all switching back and forth constantly.
Yes. Yeah.
Yeah, so fortunately for Brett, uh, finally it managed to break through a couple Pokemon, managed to get down the Weezing and the Hydreigon earlier because the Hydreigon stayed in on, or maybe no,
No,
it was
Rotom
first,
Frost.
yeah, Rotom Frost versus Politoed, and Politoed didn't go down to what I believe was a Thunder.
It was a thunder in the rain.
Yeah, a Thunder in the rain, and Politoed lived on like 3% and hit a Focus Blast. And then later in the match, it was Hydreigon versus Vikavolt, and the Vikavolt lived on like 12% against a Flamethrower or something like that. Took down the Hydreigon. So both of those were really impactful turns and was able to give Brett just the momentum for the rest of the match.
Yeah, I mean, there's really not much else to be said other than what you said there. Polytoad was. I mean, Polytoad was in. This was about a 40 turn match. Polytoad was probably in 15 to 20 turns of it.
Yeah.
I mean, it was literally there incessantly until it finally died from, I think, burn damage. It was. I mean, I like Polytoad. And I've been killed by some Polytoads before, but that was just, I mean, I swear it was in every other turn. I swear it was.
Yeah.
Um, but I mean, ultimately, the game came to a quick end once Dragapult got up a +1 on the Dragon Dance.
Yeah.
Dragapult's extremely dangerous mon and is very hard to deal with unless you have a few particular sets. It's just difficult. Um, and it got a +1 and it was over. I mean, it was a good match though. Well played on both ends. A lot of momentum, as there always in Brett's matches. I thought Shadow played it pretty well, but Brett played it better.
Yeah. And I will say, and this is going to be the last week that I'm going to try to make a point of it unless something really obvious comes up. But Brett switched out like 19 times in that 30 something turn game. A ton of U-turn, ton of volt switch, no possible defogger. I calculated it out, and if Shadow had a Stealth Rock lead and clicked Stealth Rock turn 1, Stealth Rocks would have dealt a total of 237.5%. That's over 2 entire Pokemon for just bringing one move. And I understand that like maybe Hippowdon or something didn't have the greatest matchup, but that is something to really look into. Is Rocks against Brett's team could have been a big difference maker. It didn't end up happening, of course, and as the game was, it was very fantastically played from both players. But that's just one thing. If you're going against Brett, I'd heavily consider it.
Well, I can't take that advice because I already battled him. but
Nor
if I
can
could,
I.
I would.
Yeah. Yeah, because it's just being forced to bring like Defog Braviary as your best option. It's just really rough. But either way, it was a pretty good match. And so our very last match, our featured match this week, is going to be Lyla versus TCP. Boy, this was a fun one, so you can take it away with that while I get this replay.
This was, I think, a well played match by both. But Lele had a couple of really nice sets this week with the. I think it was Scarf Breloom, right?
Yes.
And then it was some type of boosting Inteleon. What did we know? Did we find out
Specs.
if it was
Yeah, it was
Specs?
Specs damage for sure, I think.
And those two particular sets were a real problem. And a real shame. He had the Breloom that got, I think, a 2 bullet seed turn on a Manaphy that would have killed it otherwise.
Mm-hmm.
Could have seen even more of Breloom, but nevertheless, just really crafty. TCP had I think it was Taunt Gliscor that shut down I think it was a bulk up Corviknight, if I'm remembering correctly.
Yeah.
So who knows what would have happened if that had got that bulk up off. But it was a great game. TCP played it well. Lily played it well. But Lily's prep, I think, was the key difference maker in this particular matchup.
Yeah, I think you're exactly right. Breloom and Inteleon both did so much damage between the two of them, and particularly, I really liked Lily's play in that I could tell he knew exactly what his win conditions were. Because, especially towards the end, not so much in the beginning, but towards the end, after that Breloom did go down, Lilate played the Inteleon, Corviknight, and Piloswine really well, switching between those on the exact right turns to make sure that Inteleon could finish off the game.
I agree. I mean, TCP's, had a good season so far, certainly. And it wouldn't be impossible for him to miss playoffs, but it would be quite unthinkable for him to miss playoffs. But you could tell LA prepped extremely well. He knew his plan. He knew what his Mons were capable of doing, depending upon the matchup that they would get. And it was expertly played. The Inteleon, I think TCP had a chance to kill it with his Manaphy. I think Inteleon surfed on a Manaphy, and Manaphy lived on like 1 or 2%, and maybe could have clicked if he had a different move, maybe a Psychic or Energy Ball, probably would have killed it, but instead he clicked his own Surf, and it did not enough damage to kill, but Ice Shard probably from Piloswine would have killed Manaphy anyway, and the result wouldn't have changed.
Yeah.
So I think this was just a week of Lele having expert prep, like you said, knowing what sets were meant to function in what capacity, and executing his game plan. And end result is he won a match. I mean, TCP is a great player. I've played against TCP many times, but TCP at the end of the day is just a player. And he was having a great season. Will continue to have a great season as well. But great planning, great execution will get you a win most weeks. And Lille did that this week.
Yeah, and I will note that TCP actually is locked into playoffs. I did the math, I think, last week. And I think either last week or the week before, TCP guaranteed playoffs.
There you go. I know based on just wins and losses alone, he could miss, but differential, I'm sure, has made that different.
Yeah, his differential is insane right now. It's 30-something.
Yeah. But I mean, congrats to Lille. Certainly an important win, especially coming off of last week when he lost via the crit route. So a good bounce back for him, and against a good opponent, you like to win those certainly.
Yeah, for
so
certain.
hats off to him.
being the person to take down Klefki for the first time this season is an accomplishment on its own. I'm proud of you for that.
It certainly is, but maybe also finally somebody being able to make Dracozolt unimportant. Because
Yeah,
Dracozolt has been a major player in far too many games. So beating the Klefki sure is cool, but also nullifying Dracozolt's maybe just as big an accomplishment.
yeah, that's true. I can't even recall all of the weeks that we had a TCP match and it's just, oh hey, Dracozolt did like 80% in the very
Yeah.
first turn. Like it happens so often, so
Yep.
certainly a good match for Lille.
Agreed.
And that is all for the matches this week, and I don't believe there are any transactions.
I don't think so. So I just appreciate everybody dealing with my technical difficulties while I'm enjoying my vacation, and hope you had a great week 9. Week 10 and 10 through 13 should shape up to be real barn burners because we're getting into playoff elimination games pretty soon.
Mm-hmm.
And I think I think more teams in the league have a 4, 5, or 6 win record than not. So the majority of teams' playoff lives are going to be on the line as we go through the next few weeks.
Yeah, and I'm pretty sure if you can manage to get up to 8 wins, I believe you should be absolutely guaranteed 7 wins.
Yeah.
You have a pretty dang good chance at this point. Uh, So yeah,
Yeah.
those are a couple numbers to shoot for, and a couple people have 6 wins, 5 wins, stuff like that. Only a couple games to go, but anything could happen for sure.
Well, and just a bit of history for you there. I don't think an 8-team win has ever missed playoffs in ASL history, but I don't think a 6-win team has ever made playoffs in ASL history. I may be wrong there, but I'm fairly certain on those 2 statistics.
Yeah, and that would make sense. You would have to have teams losing really hard in order for teams with 6 wins to be able to.
Yeah.
Well, I guess
Yeah.
the other way around. If you would have to have teams winning really, really hard, and a lot of them for 6-win teams to be making it. And in this case, this has been fairly competitive all around. So, yeah, pretty much 7 wins is that thing that you're shooting for to have your shot.
Yeah, 7 wins is going to give you a chance.
Yeah, well, that has been our Week 9 review. Everyone, go ahead and wish Brad a happy rest of his vacation if you've made it to this part in the video. And if you haven't made it to this part in the video, then don't, because he doesn't deserve the good wishes from you anyway.
Agreed.
But with that, that is us signing off.
See ya.